what am I hearing in my head and what is that sound? What would be the voice of that? How would we translate that? And it became more less about limitations and more about what needs to be said and like what is the thing I'm trying to communicate. The band itself was started as a dare between a roommate and I when I was basically in college. He had a monthly showcase he was running at a venue here, and he had a band fall off. They couldn't make it, they're stuck or what have you. So he's just like, can you just get a bunch of your friends together who are really good like jazz improvisers? And like he like made a bunch of beats and like sequences and stuff for us to improvise over. So he sequestered himself into his studio for a weekend, came out with 8 tracks that we improvised over. So I called up at time Keith, who's our primary bass player, and he plays tenor saxophone. And then we had a friend who played violin sit in with us as well. We had a couple of rehearsals before the show, and it went off really really well. Like we just gelled. The stuff we came up with like was really workable, and it was kind of the original inception of the band was that we were an improvisational unit. So played a show, and then everybody had to kind of go their separate ways. But Keith and I held on to the name. And we kind of went off and did sort of this sort of jam jazz thing for a while. We got a live drummer who was my brother-in-law at the time, kind of just doing shows regionally, mostly around Chicago, but more of a jam vibe, heavy influence from sort of the post-bop era, like the soul jazz era of the 60s, and like just funk and R&B and Motown, that sort of thing at the time. And then we went on hiatus for, yeah, a good, I would say 10 years, came back. And then at the time I was doing a lot of stuff in the metal scene here in Chicago, so I was playing a lot heavier music. And Keith was all into that because our roots are actually both in the sort of the metal of the 80s, if you will. So we came back, but we still kept our jazz sensibilities about things, but we just started writing stuff in a metal vein, and it really is metal. You hear our first recordings, first 2 EPs that we put out, it's just pretty apparent. We were much heavier. Then we had a lineup change. We got Mike, who's our current drummer in now in 2018. He comes from more of a thrash punk noise background and has like a lot of math rock influences. We wanted to kind of get away from being really proggy and really like technical from a metal perspective. It just started becoming a little trite for us. And Mike kind of brought this sort of primal sense of his playing in with the material we were coming up with. So we put out an EP with Mike just to get him on something that we could book shows with and just kind of, hey, this is the new band. And then, of course, COVID hits. We released the album literally a month before the lockdown here happens in the States. And then we're on hiatus for 18 months again. So during that 18 months, though, like we kind of went through a bit of a transformation with Keith, particularly really got back into playing tenor saxophone. Before he played bass guitar in high school and college, and before he really got into like the thrash metal of the day back in the 80s, he was a jazz kid. He was a jazz band kid. So he played tenor sax, really was very passionate about it, really like that was he was the guy with the horn. That was his thing. And he would actually, when he got into metal, he would actually go and like transcribe the solos. Like one of our favorite origin stories is that he transcribed the guitar solo for Master of Puppets from Metallica and
Mhm.
actually onto the saxophone in E. Not in like a jazz key, like he actually played it in the key that it was written in, which for horn players, jazzers out there, that's a little bit of a challenge. It's just different fingerings and muscle memories and all that. And that's always been something that's kind of stuck with him, like that idea of like that type of fusion. I started working with more loop based stuff, more ambient stuff. I had a guitar synth that I was really diving deeply into, augmenting our sound. And before the lockdown hit, we were looking at maybe getting in somebody to play another instrument, maybe a horn, maybe a keyboard player. It was really hard for us to find that, so we just resolved to stay at 3 piece. So Keith and I got back together 18 months after the whole lockdown thing happened. This is in 2021, and he's like, I really am enjoying playing saxophone. I'm like, well, let's figure out a way to bring that in to our sound. Like, let's have another like melodic lead instrument besides the guitar. There's so many guitar players out there. There's so many bands that just have like guitar solos. It's been done before. I love I come from the world of fusion. As far as my influences, that guys like John McLaughlin, Alan Holdsworth, Al Di Meola, Scott Henderson, and all those guys. And I love what they do, but like, let's figure out something a little bit more different and unique. And then him and I we're just working. How do we do both? Like, kind of taking the mindset of like Rush, for instance, where they had sequencers and samplers on stage, or they would have like foot switches or like the Taurus bass pedals that they would play with while they're playing their main instrument. And just kind of like, okay, let's take the three-man band approach with that and see what we can do to put them, but they have all these other sounds that we can control at the same time, just to expand what people are hearing and just create something a little bit more unique with that. So he really got into working with loopers. He has a guitar, actually a bass synthesizer on his bass, so he uses a lot of that for layering and stuff. And then he was able to really quickly work out being able to switch between bass and saxophone while either playing a loop, or in my case, I actually play an eight-string guitar. And the intention behind that is I can actually comp those bass lines or whatever bass lines I need to play because I have the register to do that with the lower strings. If he's taking a solo and I'm playing bass, and I could do some stuff with my synth, like to kind of approximate a keyboard over the top of that. So that kind of became the new model for our band and our sound coming into there's just to like, hey, how is this going to work? Let's play stuff that we played in the past that we know the forms for from a jazz perspective, that we could go and play little clubs or coffee houses, just get warmed up and back into the idea of playing that now that the venues were opening around Chicago again. And it really worked for us, and it became an interesting show, and it kind of became our thing. So then we started writing with that in mind. Like I had some pieces I wrote, Keith had a few things, and I'm like, all right, it's time for us to like put an album out, right? So we basically sat down. I had probably seven or eight things, and then I had this one really long piece that I wanted to do something with, and I was just waiting for the right group of people to execute on it. And I'm just like, let's just go for it. Let's just take all the stuff that's in our bag and see what we can do with it. And let's go record it just to get it out and done. And like we can just, we have material that him and I wrote together 25 years ago. We have new stuff, and it's kind of this mixed collection of things and stuff that we enjoy playing live, and it's stuff that some people know, and then the other piece is this other thing. So we literally spent a year writing and then just taking that and playing shows at this whole bag of material that we were working on. And it doesn't certainly sound anything out of the ordinary, just kind of is what it is. But the idea is like get it to a point where it's like, all right, now this is ready for us to go to pre-production, go to studio. And we ended up recording 15 tracks, right? And then we realized this is just way too much for a full length. Like this, too much music. And then the one piece had were really six tunes banded together. So we just like, all right, well, since that's a separate piece, let's cut that off. And we really just fleshed it out. Self-released all that on vinyl, on CD, and that was kind of our real introduction of like, hey, this is Sons of Ra. We're here. We started working with Dave at Earsplit. Mike, our drummer, is one of his other bands is on a label that Dave works with. Mike mentioned Dave, like, hey, just see if he could work with us. I went from there with that. So literally the day we release the EP for Tropic of Cancer, that's getting out there. We're getting some really good press with Dave. It's just been great to work with him. Dave tees up for us to have a phone call with this guy Ken Golden, who is the head of the Laser's Edge group, Free Electric Sound. And Ken heard the EP, he really liked it, and he's just like, well, are you guys going to record an album? I'm like, well, it's done. We're actually mixing it right now. So timing just worked out perfectly for that. And since then, we've just basically spent the last year prepping to get this album out now, which is now Standard Deviation. That's coming out next week.
So you said over
Yeah.
the COVID things changed. How would you say things changed for you?
So it was a huge time of introspection, mostly around just kind of trying to really think through what I wanted to do musically, like from a composer standpoint. The guitar stuff, like the wood shedding, that's pretty self-explanatory. You go and you do that, and it's kind of an autopilot thing. Just doing etude studies and like just following stuff online. I was kind of boning up on my jazz chops, but really the composition stuff, I was able to actually take an online class with Chick Corea before he passed away. He offered this master's class. My wife paid for it. And it was all online and it wasn't like super personal, but being able to ask Chick Corea questions about things and not like the real technical like theory stuff. Like those are table stakes. Like you're talking to Chick Corea, like the big picture things. And there was a few things that um he it really just kind of stuck with me. And just having that sort of window of a few months really kind of shaped like, oh, I could take this back and start applying it as a composer and like writing these things out. I stopped thinking of like the music I'm writing is just guitar-based rock trio, instrumental fusion trio stuff, and started thinking a bit more like, what am I hearing in my head, and what is that sound? What would be the voice of that? Or how would we translate that? And it became more or less about limitations and more about what needs to be said and like what is the thing I'm trying to communicate as a composer. And what's the essence of it, what's the mood, the emotion, and not so much about like what's gonna like either make people excited from a technical standpoint, or it's just gonna be just trying to write some sort of really obvious hook all the time, but just kind of thinking it more holistically. And that was really the huge shift for me. I think once I got with Keith and we started talking about that, and one idea that kept bubbling up was like, let's make the album we want to listen to, not an album we can go book shows with. We've done that twice already, or we've done that with other bands. And it's like, let's make an album like, if nobody buys it, fine. Like, let's just make an album we could put on the turntable, put it on, and like we can just enjoy it. Kind of like just thinking in a very different way. And I think that really propelled us to get these two pieces out, these two releases out. So.
You're really motivated just for fun in a way.
At the core, yeah. I mean, if it's not fun, then why are we doing it? That's absolutely 100% at the core of like what I do as a musician, and I think with the other two members of our band, that's just an unwritten sort of tenet of like, yeah, we really have to enjoy this. Like, it's got to be to do all the other stuff that needs to be done with loading the gear out, or going on the road, or whatever have you, having business meetings, all those kinds of things, like whatever that core is that we get to do when we get on stage. If that's still got to be magic, and that's still got to be fun for us.
Obviously, the next few months, the new album's coming out. You're probably planning to do some shows and things like that.
Yeah, so yeah, we have our release show here next week at Reggie's in Chicago. That's kind of one of our anchor venues that we typically play at. Um, our hometown shows, especially the ones where it's kind of more of an event, we typically bring in other folks now to play the other parts that we've written on the album. And just it's just a lot of it is just logistics, but we just have a good pool of really ace musicians that we've established good relationships with. They can hang with us. They understand how our brains work. They like the
Mhm.
music. So we bring them in just to give the audience something completely unique. So our show here next week, we're actually going to be a septet. So we have a whole complement of alt saxes from tenor, soprano, alto. We have a violinist. She's a classical concert violinist in a few symphonies around the Midwest. One of my dear friends who I kind of came up with in high school. We have very similar backgrounds. He's actually a professor at one of the universities here, out in the suburbs of Chicago. But he is carrying all the different harmonies and rhythms and stuff on a secondary guitar capacity. And it really just makes that show, it really fleshes that out for us. So our home audience can get that full or almost orchestral, or some, not I don't say symphonic, but orchestral feeling to the music that we're writing. We can provide that for them. So that's kind of the big thing for us. Everything else that we're doing though is out of state. We hit the road later in the month. We're going to be going down through Indiana and Kentucky, and then the next month we're going out to Baltimore. And then just kind of more just the trajectory out east is a lot easier for us to plan for. And there's just the people who seem to be the most interested in us are out on the East Coast. So that's really the core of us. But we actually have a showcase out in Baltimore. We have some dear friends who lived here who are going to be joining us out in Baltimore for a showcase we're doing. They're going to, we gave them the charts already. They're going to be kind of auxiliary members of us when we play out there, which is going to be a first for us on the road of like having people who can meet up. They are tight enough where we can get to our sound check rehearsal with them, and then having a good show with that. So that's really kind of the things we're kind of looking for with just getting out and playing, and just being able to have these different conversations with different people musically as well. So
I was
the
curious
three of
if
us
you,
have a good time. Yeah, but when we
good,
have more
good.
people on stage, a bigger party. Yeah,
Cool, cool. I was curious if you could open for any band, say you could be the opening band on a tour with any other act. Are there any other acts that come to mind that you would love to be able to open for that might have a similar audience?
There's quite a few. Snarky Puppy would probably be one.
Hmm. Hmm.
The Mesthetics with Brandon Lewis. So that's Anthony Pirog on guitar, and then if you're familiar with the post-punk band Fugazi, that's the rhythm section from Fugazi from the '80s. They're doing this sort of punk jazz mashup, and then Brandon Lewis is the saxophone player. Um, they're right in our wheelhouse of kind of like sensibilities. So that would be another band. I just love the opportunity. The Alex Skolnick Trio would be another one. Again, coming from that era as a thrash kid back when I was in high school, and just with those jazz sensibilities, it's just it would be a good match for us. And then I think from if we were playing a heavier show, probably Cynic, one of my favorite bands.
Yeah,
They are to me the vanguard of jazz metal fusion. They just do it. There are examples of bands who do that out there, but like they were like one of the first ones that stepped up to the plate back in the '90s and like this is what we're doing. We're taking Mahavishnu and we're taking Death and we're putting it together. So yeah.
cool. Yeah, I know Cynic. I think I've done a few reaction videos to their music. It's probably deep in my catalog in the channel, but I guess I could throw a link down
Sure.
below. That's cool. You love Cynic. That's great. Yeah, they stood out to me as a really
Yeah.
great band too. Yeah. The last couple of minutes have just been
Well,
frozen
excited about
and haven't been able to hear you.
he
Well, unfortunately, the internet kind of cut out there. I don't know if it's well, he's in Chicago. Eric's in Chicago, so maybe there's are they getting ice storms there like they're getting in Canada? Because Chicago's not too far from Canada, of course, right along the border there, the Great Lakes. And anyways, so thanks to Eric for taking the time out to talk to me, and of course everyone else who's watching the video and wants to learn about Sons of Ra. Make sure you check out their website information. It's down below. Check out their music. And if you're in the area, in the neighborhood, and you can catch them live, absolutely don't miss that show. It sounds like they've got some great stuff planned. So thanks for watching. See you all later. Bye now.